Hello, welcome indeed to Knitter Matters. It's been a while since I've seen you, so I do hope you're joining me, and whether you're joining live or the replay later, welcome indeed, and thank you so much for taking your time out to join me. So this is season 2, episode 29, and it's so good to be back. Regular viewers will know that I've been moving house from Florida to Pennsylvania, and I'm now ensconced in Malvern in Pennsylvania. I don't have everything with me at the moment, but we can still do Knitter Matters, so that's great. Anyway, I'm Cheryl Lampard. I'm an image consultant with Style Matters International, my company, but throughout my life there have been two passions, sewing and knitting, and particularly knitting. It's something I do every day, and it's my stress reliever. I'm also a knitting educator. I'm a Craft Yarn Council certified knitting instructor as well, and I used to be the proud owner of a yarn store in Brighton, England. And one of the great joys of owning a yarn store is that you get to teach people how to knit. And I loved it then, and I love doing it even more now, I think, because I can reach more people with this wonderful platform that's social media. I should have asked you before we started that if you can hear me. I'm assuming you can. I'm trying to see on my phone if I can. Dawn is there. Hey Dawn, how are you? So nice of you to join us, and I'm assuming you can hear me okay. Just let us know if not. I will carry on, assuming that that's the case. Anyway, one of the great things, although I don't have everything with me, I do have my cameraman back, so there's going to be no wobbly bits when I move the camera, and you should actually get a better angle over my shoulder, as obviously my cameraman can move around, whereas I was a bit static with the iPad on the frame. Anyway, let's get started. Today is called Fringe Benefits because it's all about fringes. So I'm going to ask the camera to move to the worktop and we'll get started. So, Fringe Benefits, I called it that, as many an item can benefit from a bit of fringing. Now, typically we see fringes on scarves and shawls, but there's absolutely no reason why you can't add them to other elements of a garment or an accessory. I've seen very successful fringing on the hemlines of a garment, or the pocket edgings of a garment, even along a knitted collar. Perhaps on the edge of a roll neck. Let's say this is your turtleneck or your roll neck. Let's do it that way around, actually. That this could be your roll neck, and then this is kind of splayed out as almost a yoke. If you had a fancy fringe, you could do something like that. And although traditionally a scarf fringes at the ends, why not put it along the sides? I actually have a manufactured scarf, a woven scarf that has the fringes coming out the sides, and it's really effective when it's laid over a coat. So think about different ways of using fringes. You can use them on the cuffs of a sweater or gloves, or certainly on children's things. So you think about how you want to use your fringes. Now, I'm going to show you a few different ways to do a fringe today. This fringing here, sort of with tassels really, this is probably the method that most knitters and crocheters and craftspeople are familiar with, and this is added afterwards. And the way that this is done, I'm going to flip this over and show you on this end, but you just need to cut lengths of yarn. You remember that you want to cut double the length that you want. So whatever this length was, and I have to say I cheated, rather than just cut strands out and measure them with a ruler, which of course you can do. This seemed to be the perfect length for my fringe for this particular thing. So it's an old checkbook cover. We don't use checkbooks so much now, so I had this cover lying around for some reason, but it's the perfect length, and I just wrapped my yarn round and then cut it along this edge. But you could use a cardboard template, whatever. Depends how many fringes you're doing. But I would recommend some sort of template, because it does get tedious just measuring yarn, cutting it. And also when you measure it sort of like this, it tends to get stretched out. So when you cut it, it actually gets shorter. So whichever method you're using, don't stretch your yarn out when you're winding it round your template or cutting it, just lining it up with a ruler or a measure of some kind, because when you cut it, it'll spring back. So anyway, I've got some extra lengths of yarn here. I'm going to use 2. You could try it with one yarn length gives you a fairly sort of skimpy tassel, but it does depend on the garment or the thickness of yarn that you're working with. Try it with 2 first and then try add more or less. Just see how it looks. Oh, hi Donna, thank you so much for joining us. Right, now I'm going to use a crochet hook here because I just find it easier, but if you don't have a crochet hook, you can equally well do it with a knitting needle. It's just, a crochet hook is just easier to grab onto. So what I'm going to do is I fold my strands in half, and I'm going to go through from the wrong side to the right side. I'm going to actually start somewhere in the middle here just to make it easier to see. So I'm going to go through sort of this is my bound off edge, so I'm just going to go through those 2 stitches there, and I'm going to pull it through, and I'm not going to pull it all the way through, then I'm just going to pull that through like that and tighten that up. Okay, that's all there is to it. I'll do a couple more so you can see. So you just fold up your tassels or your lengths of yarn, and I like my tassels to be close. I don't want big gaps in between, but again, if you're using a lot of yarn, you may want to spread them out more. It really just depends on how you want it to look. So I'll do another one, then perhaps we'll add another. So I'm not going to go in every stitch, every bound off stitch. I'm going to probably go in every other one. Go from the back, from the wrong side to the front, and through, and then just flip that through. Okay, and I find that is not nicely sort of butting up each side. Let me just try it with 3. Let's see what the result that we get there, so you can see the difference. With a very thick yarn you might struggle a bit, but let's just see. Let's go in there, see what happens here, and you could also put in different colors, so you can see, yeah, that's a bit thicker, that one, but it's still, yeah, it fills up the width of probably 2 stitches quite nicely. Rima, hi, thank you for joining us. So, and on the back, this is what it looks like. Now, of course, you could, if you prefer the formation of the knots, this is my wrong side, but if you prefer how that looks, you can use that to the front. It's your fringing. You can do however you like. And Carla has joined us. So nice of you. Thank you. So that's the basis of simple fringing. And even though you've cut the lengths to a certain amount, you probably still need to trim them up a bit when you've finished. Just be careful, because otherwise you can start that sort of thing. If you trim it up too much, you might find it's uneven, and then you're going to trim again. Before you know it, your 2 or 3 inches fringe has become 1 inch, and that's probably not what you wanted. Okay, so that's a very simple way of using sort of a standard fringe, but again, it looks really good along the edges of a scarf. You could put it on if this was a pocket top, or something like that, a pocket that was pocket edge. That would look really cool. You could use it on the bottom of a garment, anything you like, but you can play about with that. You can put different colors in, whatever you wanted to do. So that's a very simple tassel fringe. I love doing those. It keeps me busy for hours. Okay, here's another fringe that I did. This one is really rather nice. If you want a sort of more formalized fringe, it's almost like little castellations. Super easy to do, and you would sew this on afterwards. I'm sure there's a way that you could knit this in at the same time, but this is probably easier to handle if you do it and then sew it on afterwards. And it's so simple but very effective. This would be great on the edge of maybe around a collar of a sort of heavy coat. You could try it with a thinner yarn if you're using a really thick yarn, but a finer yarn in the same color or contrast color. It would look great on the sleeves, on pocket, or even on the hem of a coat, a knitted coat or cardigan, something like that. Let me show you how to do this. It's super simple. So I've cast on, you decide how long you want your fringe, how long you want the depth of it to be, and you might have to play about with it. I've cast on 12 stitches here. I just use a cable cast on, and I would recommend that you do a cable cast on for this fringe. And then all you do, so your next row after the cast on, you're going to actually bind off. And you're going to bind off, I've got 12 stitches here, I'm going to bind off 10. So just bear with me while I do that. I want to have 2 stitches left on my left hand needle effectively, or 2 stitches left. I'm not doing this very tightly, I'm doing this at a sort of, you know, my usual knitting tension, if you will. Okay, so however long you want your fringe, you can calculate the length, decide how many stitches you want. So I want to be left with 2 stitches. Okay, so I am, once I've knitted that, I've got 2 stitches now. Gail, hi Gail, thank you for joining us. Okay, so now I'm going to turn my work around and I'm going to purl 2. Trying not to get the tail of my yarn caught up. I'm going to turn round again so the right side is facing me. Marilyn, thanks for joining us. Oh, this is lovely. I'm so glad you're all joining us. It's wonderful. Now I'm going to use the cable cast on method again, and I'm going to cast on another 10 stitches. So I want to be left with the 12 again. So 1, 2. So remember, I've already got 2 on my left hand needle. And Gail, oh, another Gail, how lovely, thank you for joining us. 2, 4, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, Anne, hi Anne, hope you're well. And thank you for joining us. 4, 8, 12. That's my 12. And again, I'm just going to bind off. Nothing special about the binding off, just the sort of, probably the first way we've all learnt to bind off. But again, not too tightly, and I'll explain that in a minute. If you want to keep them nice and straight, you don't want to cast off too tightly. Debbie has joined us now. Hi Debbie, thank you for watching. So I want to again just make sure I cast off 10 or however many stitches you've got so that you end up with 2. So 1 on your right hand needle, 1 on the left, knit that. Hello Kimberly, thanks for joining us. And again I've turned round and I'm going to purl 2. Purl 2, turn back to the right side and going to cast on another 10. So, and you just keep doing that for the length that you want. Okay, let me just get these threads out of the way. So you can see this is where I started and this is my second one. And if I bring this one back in again, I actually did 16 stitches on this one. Yes, 16. No, yes, I did. And I did however many fringes just to show. I did block it slightly just to keep it flat because for this I wanted it to be really quite a flat fringe. But if you wanted to something a bit funkier and a bit more interesting so that it becomes a bit more fun, I've done exactly the same thing here, but see how curly this is. Now this would be cute on a kiddie's garment or perhaps on the calf of a you know, a fun coloured sweater, something like that. But all I've done here is gone down a needle size. So here I used I think it was a 4mm, which I think is a US 6. Sorry, I'm still thinking in millimeters, but I think it's a US 6 for this worsted weight yarn. Here I went down to a 3.5. So that's 2 sizes difference because there would be a 375 in the middle. So that would be a US, oh, what would that be? A US 4. I'm sure it would be. If I'm wrong, forgive me, and somebody will tell me, I'm sure. And I made sure my cast on was really snug. I didn't bind off tightly, but I did cast on tightly. So if you cast on a bit tighter, what happens is, of course, you're pulling that in. You're pulling that in, and that creates that kind of twisty curliness. They look like those cheesy whatsits, are they? Those cheesy things, but that's what they remind me of in this colour. But exactly the same stitch, just different tension, and that's the difference that you can get. So it's very simple to have a different effect just by changing the needle size. But remember, don't bind off tightly, because otherwise you're sort of, you're counteracting just what you've done to tighten it up and make it twisty. And Dolores has joined. Thank you so much for watching, Dolores. It's lovely to have you all back. I have missed you all. So that's a couple of options with a very simple sort of castellated fringe, but using a different needle size. It's amazing the difference just by changing a needle size that you can get. Right, now the other fringing I've done here, this one, I did this very quickly, so it's not the neatest, but this is called a Latvian fringe, and I knitted this as I went along. I thought I'd be clever and do an extra row, but I don't think that actually helps on this. But if I lift that up, you can see that it's actually part of the cast on. That's my cast on, then I've knitted straight up and then done another row. This would have been more effective if I'd have done that in another color, but I was just trying to see what it looked like. But let me show you how to do this, because you can really have some fun with this. I think this would look really nice once you've done one set of fringing. If you then did something decorative here, along here, or changed color, then went back to your solid color, this would be really fun as the kind of on a cuff of a glove or a mitten. Maybe if you're starting off a sleeve, something like that, and you don't have to do any ribbing, because this in itself will hold the knitting flat. So let me show you how to do this. It does take a little bit of practice, because you feel a bit all fingers at first. Now all I've done here, I've only cast on 8 stitches here, because it does take a while to work along the row, and I don't want you to get fed up and stop watching. So I've only done 8 stitches. So I've cast on using a long tail cast on. So, and this is important, because your next row, it's a wrong side row, but this is where I'm going to work the fringe, because it's going to come through on the right side. So let me just pull up some yarn here. What I'm going to do here, I'm going to hold this tail out the way. So as if I'm going to knit here, I'm now going to wrap this around my index finger 3 times. So going over the top, once, twice, 3 times. Okay, don't do it too tight, because you won't get it off your finger, and it'll make the size of the fringe a little smaller. So now what you're going to do is grab all those 3 threads, if you will, and pull them through, remembering to remove your finger at the same time. Now take your time over this, because if you stretch this out or go too fast, you'll going to end up with just a lot of yarn pulled out. So you do need to take your time. And Lynn has joined us. Thank you for joining. So we're going to do the same thing again. So we're going to right needle as if to knit that stitch over the top of my finger. 1, 2, 3. Don't pull it too tightly, and you're going to grab all those threads and pull them through. Okay, now you see why I only cast on 8 stitches here, so that you could see and see what I need to do with the next row, because this first row is a bit tricky. Just give those a little tug so they don't fall about. Okay, and the same thing again. Hi Lee, thanks for joining us. Over the top, 1, 2, 3. I'm going to grab that as if to knit it. Well, I am knitting it really. And take your finger out at the same time, because I have particularly large joints on my index finger. So if I do it too tightly, I can't actually get my finger out. And also, if you're doing a long row, you're going to end up with a blue finger by the end of it, because you'll have cut off the circulation to your finger. So 1, 2, 3. I do hold on to this part, although I'm not knitting with that in the sense of pulling that through. It helps to hold on to this part of the yarn, stops this unraveling, or stops this kind of going a bit loose. Nearly there. 2 more stitches. I'm trying to get my finger out. Okay, 1 more time, or 2 more times, and then I'll just come back along the row. Over, once, twice, 3 times. Okay, and you're just pulling that through. I'll just do it once more, and then I won't do all 8 stitches, otherwise we'd be here too long. Once, twice, whoops, 3 times, and pull that through. I'm just going to cheat and knit these last 2 stitches so that I can show you what happens on the next row. So this is how I think that looks quite nice like that actually. So that's how that looks on, that is your wrong side row. So remember, we cast on using a long tail cast on, and I turned round, so I'm working on the wrong side now, because as I turn it round, you want this fringe on the right side. Now I am just going to knit along here. Remember, I didn't do loops on these first 2 stitches for reasons of speed, but you would probably do it along the whole row. So this row now is quite important because it's going to stabilize the stitches. And again, just take your time. Don't overstretch the stitches out, because if you do, you're going to pull all those loops that you just so carefully knitted. So, and instead of, you're not going in here, you're going to knit all 3 at the same time, all these 3 threads at the same time. Now you see, as I do that, they want to sort of pull out. So you just want to give that a tug. And I try and work on the tips of the needle here so that it lessens the chance of my loops pulling out. Okay, so I'm just going to give that another tug. And I would do this first row as a knit row, but you can do it in a different stitch if you want. Okay, so take your time doing this. Give it a little tug as you do it, and work on the tips of the needle so that your loops aren't pulling out. Okay, my last one there. Whoops, yeah. And there you go. So once you've done that, let me just whiz along. That's how it's looking on the back. I'm just going to whiz along with easy knit stitch, so, and then turn it round. But you can do whatever stitch pattern you want. Okay, right. So now we've stabilized our stitches. But what I would do once you've knitted a row or so, just pull them out with a needle just to make sure they're all the right length. They're not going to go anywhere now. It's just that first row and certainly that second row where you're trying to stabilize them. Okay, so that's a Latvian fringe. Really nice little edge, and you can do clever things with that. I've seen this done where an I-cord has been done after the fringe, and it looks really pretty, and then onto the knitting. And hi Fran, thank you for joining us. So that's the benefit of fringing. So that's a little demo of how to do 3 different types of fringing. I hope you enjoyed that. Let me just, okay, there we go. So easy peasy fringe, still easy peasy fringe, castellated fringe, and same thing but twisted. And then there's Latvian fringe, which is knitted in. Okay, I did 2 layers there, but actually I think it looks better with 1. But again, depending on your pattern, but it does make a cute little hemline and it doesn't roll up. So that's how you would do it. Really simple once you know how. I'm going to ask the camera, oh, Lorraine has joined us. Thank you for joining us. I'm going to ask the camera to come back so I can finish off. Well, I hope you enjoyed that, and I hope you play with some fringes and different yarns. You can even add sort of sparkly yarns, whatever you want really, but it's a fun edge to put, and it does, you know, it brightens up an accessory, it makes it a bit more interesting. Certainly it adds things, it adds a different look to a garment as well, and kids love it on their clothes as well. Okay, so this episode, as all other episodes, will be uploaded to the page afterwards, and then we'll upload it onto YouTube within 24 hours. So you can always watch it again on our YouTube channel, which is Knitter Matters. And if you're looking for it, it is season 2, episode 29, and it's called Fringe Benefits. So thank you so much for your patience while I have been away. It's so nice to be back. Thank you very much for watching, and I look forward to seeing you next time. And in between now and then, stay well, stay safe, and stay knitting. Bye for now.